Greetings, this is the Grumpy Old Slan, and today we're going to be looking at 6th level magic user spells in Unearthed Arcana. So as we can see in the list, there are 30 spells, of which 6 are new, and these are the ones we're going to be taking a look at. The first spell is Chain Lightning. It has a range of 4 inches plus half an inch per level. It has a casting time of 6 segments, and it has an instantaneous duration. When this spell is cast, the electrical discharge begins as a single stroke of lightning, 1/4 inch wide, commencing from the fingertips of the caster and extending to the primary target, which must lie within the maximum range of the spell as dictated by the level of the caster. Chain Lightning differs sharply from a lightning bolt spell in that it has a primary target as opposed to an area of effect. If the primary target makes a successful saving throw versus spell, 1/2 damage from the bolt of Chain Lightning is taken. Otherwise, full damage, 1d6 points per level of the caster, will be inflicted. In addition, after striking the initial target, the bolt arcs to the nearest other object, be it animal, vegetable, or mineral. This chain of striking continues from one object to another object nearest it, possibly setting up an oscillation between two, presumably stationary or immobilized, objects, or a regular pattern involving 3 or more objects. If 2 or more possible targets are equidistant, the chain lightning will arc to metal first, then to the one with the most fluid, otherwise at random. The chain keeps building up to as many links, including the initial target, as the spellcaster has levels. Thus, a 12th level magic user casting the spell would hit 12 targets, the primary target first, then 11 other, not necessarily different, targets. After the initial strike, each object subsequently struck is entitled to a saving throw versus spell, if applicable. Success on this save indicates that the stroke actually arced to the next nearest target, and the target that saved takes no damage. The arcing bolt will continue until it has struck the appropriate number of objects, as indicated by target's failure to save or lack of the opportunity to do so, as for an inanimate object or non-magical creature, until the stroke fades out or strikes a target that grounds it. Direction is never a consideration in plotting the path of the arcing chain lightning. Distance is a factor, though. A single arc can never be longer than the range limit. If, in order to arc, the bolt must travel a greater distance than its maximum range, the stroke fades into nothingness. A tree or substantial piece of conductive metal, such as interconnecting iron bars of a large cell or cage, will ground the lightning stroke and prevent further arcing. The lightning inflicts 1 less d6 of damage on each target it hits after striking the primary target for the first time. If the initial target was struck by a 12d6 bolt, the next target struck takes an 11d6 bolt, then 10d6, 9d6, 8d6, 7d6, and so on all the way down to 1d6, the last spurt of energy from the bolt. A saving throw for half damage applies on each strike, different from the save versus spell to see if the lightning actually hits a secondary target. The caster can be struck by an arc from his or her own spell. The material components are a bit of fur, an amber, glass, or crystal rod, and as many silver pins as the spellcaster has levels of experience. One of the rare new spells that is strictly intended for combat situations, certainly very powerful, although a simple lightning bolt will inflict just as much damage and be maybe a little bit safer for the magic user and his or her allies. That said, it's kind of a fun thing to have, although I can see if you are playing Theater of the Mind, it could be difficult to figure out who is the next nearest person. My feeling is probably a lot of random rolls will be used to determine who gets hit by the next arc in that kind of game. It mentions that 2 presumably stationary or immobilized objects can have the chain lightning oscillate between the two. However, if the duration of the spell is instantaneous, that means no one has a chance to move. The DM will maybe need to determine, is it going to be 1 segment per arc, maybe half a segment to give targets a chance to move, Also, perhaps give the magic user a chance to move away after casting the spell to make sure it doesn't go back to him. I don't mind the two saving throws here, since one is just to see if the arc will hit a target. If it doesn't hit that target, it'll just hit someone else. The second to determine if you get half damage. That's fair enough for all those kinds of spells, so nothing out of the usual. I will also mention that if a magic user has fewer silver pins than his or her levels, then that means that the chain lightning would just not arc as many times as the caster's levels. It would just arc as many times as the number of silver pins used to cast the spell. Were that to be the case, I would personally rule that the first hit would still be the maximum damage, and so on going down. This is certainly a good spell to use on a large group of enemies that are bunched up before you're in melee range, because otherwise your allies are just as likely to be hit as your foes. That said, it's still a fun spell, and I do like the idea of it. Next is Contingency. It has a duration of 1 day per level, casting time of 1 turn, and the area of effect is the magic user. By means of this spell, the magic user is able to place another spell upon his or her person so that the latter spell will come into effect upon occurrence of the situation dictated during the casting of the contingency spell. The contingency spell and the spell it is to bring into effect, the companion spell, are in effect cast at the same time. The 1 turn casting time indicated above is a total for both castings. The spell to be brought into effect by the prescribed contingency must be one which affects the magic user's person. Feather fall, levitation, fly, statue, feign death, etc., and of a level no higher than 1/3 of the experience level of the caster, rounded down, to an upper limit of the 6th spell level. A 4th level companion spell maximum at 12th, 13th, or 14th level of experience, a 5th level maximum at 15th, 16th, or 17th level of experience, and a 6th level maximum at 18th level of experience and beyond. Only one contingency spell can be in effect upon the spellcaster at any one time. If a second is used, the first one, if still active, is cancelled. The situation prescribed to bring the spell into effect must be clear, although it can be rather general. For example, a contingency cast with an airy water companion spell might prescribe that any time the magic user is plunged into or otherwise engulfed in water or similar liquid, the airy water spell will instantly come into effect. Likewise, the contingency could bring a feather fall into effect any time the magic user falls over a 2-foot distance. In all cases, the contingency immediately brings into effect the second spell, the latter being cast instantaneously when the prescribed circumstances occur. Note that complex, complicated, and/or convoluted prescribed conditions for effecting the play of the Dwemer are likely to cause the whole spell complex, the contingency spell and the companion magic, to simply fail when called upon. The material component of this spell are, in addition to those of the companion spell, 100 gold pieces worth of quicksilver, an elephant ivory statuette of the magic user, and an eyelash of an ogre magi, Kirin, or similar spell-using creature. Note that the ivory statuette is not destroyed by the spellcasting, although it might be subject to wear and tear, and it must be carried on the person of the spellcaster for the contingency spell to perform its function when called upon. So this is quite the interesting spell. One that clearly is meant to be used before setting out on an adventure, since it'll last well over 1 week and is likely to last 2 or more weeks. It offers a lot of protection to the magic user. It would be nice if a contingency spell could be cast on somebody other than the magic user. I can see why some people might decide that for game balance reason it is better to not have that. The examples given of the spells that can be used are fairly decent. The one thing to note is that the contingency spell will cause the companion spell to be cast, whether or not the magic user wants it to happen if the stated conditions occur. And speaking of those, I would, as a DM, require that the player write down what the conditions are and keep that. So that when the player states, the companion spell should kick in, then we can review what the written conditions are, and the DM can decide whether or not what's happening fulfills the contingency causing the companion spell to be cast. I like this spell. I think there's a lot of fun stuff to be done with it. Next is Ensnarement. It has a range of 1 inch, a casting time of 1 turn, and a special duration and area of effect. The casting of this spell attempts a dangerous act, the luring of a powerful creature from another plane to a specially prepared trap where it will be held until it agrees to perform one service in return for freedom from the ensnarement spell. The spell causes an awareness of a gate-like opening on the plane of the creature to be ensnared. A special saving throw is then made to determine if the creature detects the nature of the planar opening as a trap or believes it to be a gate. To save, the creature must roll equal to or less than its intelligence score on 3d6. The score is modified by the difference between the creature's intelligence and that of the spellcaster. If the creature has a higher score, the difference is subtracted from its dice roll to save. If the spellcaster has a higher score, the difference is added to the total of the 3d6. If the saving throw succeeds, the creature merely ignores the spell-created opening, and the Dwemer fails. If the saving throw is not made, the creature steps into the opening and is ensnared. The type of creature to be ensnared must be known and stated, and if it has a specific proper or given name, this also must be used in casting of the ensnarement spell. When actually ensnared, the creature coming from another plane to that of the spellcaster is not constrained from harming the one who trapped it. Therefore, the caster uses a magic circle for creatures from the upper planes or the astral plane, a thaumaturgic triangle for creatures from the ethereal, elemental, or concordant opposition planes, or a pentagram for creatures from the lower and infernal planes. Regardless of such protection, there's a chance that the entrapped creature will be able to break free and wreak its vengeance upon the spellcaster. The base chance for an ensnared creature to break free depends on the manner in which the confining design was made. A hand-done one has a base chance of 20% of being broken. One inlaid or carved has only a base of 10%, and that for the first time only, which indicates whether or not the job was done properly. This base chance is modified by the total score of the magic user's combined intelligence and experience level compared to the intelligence score and the experience level or number of hit dice of the creature summoned. If the spellcaster has a higher total, that difference is subtracted from the percentage chance of the creature to break free. If the creature has a higher total, that difference is added to its chance to break free. The chance may be further modified by care and preparation of the protective symbol. If the handmade protection is inscribed over a long period of time, using specially prepared pigments, 1,000 gold pieces per turn of application, the chance of an ensnared creature breaking free is reduced by 1% for every turn spent so preparing, i.e., an expenditure of 1 turn and 1,000 gold pieces reduces the chance of breaking free by 1%. This can bring the base chance to 0%. But the further modifications for intelligence and level hit dice still must be made thereafter, and no amount of special preparation can negate that risk. Similarly, an inlaid or inscribed design can be brought to a 0% chance of being broken by inlaying it with various metals, minerals, etc. This effort will require a minimum of 1 full month of time and add no less than 50,000 gold pieces to the basic cost of having the protection inlaid or inscribed into stone. Any breaking of the lines of protection or blurring of the glyphs, runes, and sigils which guard the magical barrier will spoil the efficacy of the Dwemer and allow the creature to break free automatically. Even a straw dropped across the lines of a circle destroys its power. Fortunately, the creature within cannot so much as place a straw upon any portion of the inscribed protective device, for the magic of the barrier absolutely prevents it. Once safely ensnared, the creature can be kept for as long as the spellcaster dares. Remember the danger of something breaking the inscription. The caster can offer bribes, use promises, or make threats in order to exact one service from the captive creature. The DM will then assign a value to what the magic user has said to the ensnared creature, rating it from 0 to 6. This rating is then subtracted from the intelligence score of the creature. If the creature makes its saving throw a score equal to or less than its adjusted intelligence, it will refuse service. New offers, bribes, etc. can be made, or the old one reoffered 24 hours later when the creature's intelligence has dropped by 1 point due to confinement. This can be repeated until the creature promises to serve, until it breaks free, or until the caster decides to release it by means of some ridden spell. It need not be stressed that certain other spells can be used to force a captive creature into submission. Once the single service is completed, the creature need only so inform the spellcaster to be instantly teleported from whence it came. Revenge can be sought, cf. Afridi, Aerial Servant, and Invisible Stalker. Impossible commands or unreasonable commands will never be agreed to. Another spell for dealing with extraplanar creatures. I'm not going to comment too much on it, but I find that the special saving throw based on 3d6 rubs me the wrong way. Either have all saving throws be like that, or use a d20 for this. I don't see why a d20 shouldn't be used, particularly since some extraplanar creatures have higher than 18 intelligence, if my memory serves, and therefore could never be ensnared. The other thing that's not quite clear to me is that they talk about the chance of the circle being broken and it indicating whether or not the job was done properly. This should not be affected by the level of intelligence or the hit dice of the creature, if it is a reflection of the quality of the craftsmanship. And the third thing I will mention is that this is the first time that I can recall reading about what kind of constraining device is to be used for creatures coming from different planes. So the magic circle, the thaumaturgic triangle, or the pentagram. Perhaps it is mentioned elsewhere, but I don't recall reading it anywhere else. Next is eye bite. It has a range of 20 feet, a casting time of 1 segment, a special duration, and it will affect one creature. An eye bite spell enables the caster to merely meet the gaze of his or her subject and speak a single word to cause the dweemer to be effectuated. With this single spell, the caster can choose which particular effect is to strike the subject, but the eye bite spell is then dissipated, even though only one of its 4 possible effects were used. The 4 effects of the spell to be chosen are these. Charm. The magic user can charm a person or monster by gaze and vocalization of a single word. The effect is to make the charmed subject absolutely loyal and docile with respect to the charmer, even to the point of personal danger. It is otherwise the same as a charm person or charm monster spell. A successful saving throw versus spell negates this effect. Fear. The magic user can cause fear by gaze and vocalization of a single word. The subject will act as if struck by a fear spell unless a saving throw versus spell is successful. Sicken. This power enables the caster to merely gaze at the subject, speak a word, and cause sudden nausea and sickness to sweep over the subject's body. The victim will be at 1/2 normal abilities, strength, intelligence, etc. from the pain and fever. Creatures without ability scores are not affected. Movement will be at 1/2 normal rate also, and the victim will have to rest half of each turn in order to be able to move at all. A saving throw versus spell will negate the power of the dweemer, otherwise the victim will remain struck by the sickness, losing 1 actual point of constitution per day until death occurs at 0 constitution points. The effects are all negated by a successful Dispel Magic spell or by a heal spell. Alter Reality, Limited Wish, and Wish spells will also remove the sickness, but a Cure Disease will not. Note, all non-human, non-demi-human, and non-humanoid creatures save at +4 versus this effect. Sleep. The magic user can cause any individual to fall into a comatose slumber by means of a gaze and a single word, unless the subject makes its saving throw versus spell. Creatures normally subject to the first level spell sleep save at -2. Undead are not subject to this power. Affected creatures must be shaken or otherwise shocked to bring them back to consciousness. I quite like this spell. I think there's a lot of opportunities for it in an investigative or infiltration type scenario. It mentions for the sleep that undead are not subject to this power. However, I would rule that undead are not affected by any of these since they can't be charmed, they wouldn't feel fear, they can't succumb to sickness either. I would not limit this to the sleep effect but to all of them. The other thing that's not clear to me is, must the victim hear the word that is being spoken? The range being 20 feet would seem to imply. I don't know why they didn't use 2 inches as the range. This is more standard for most spells. If the victim is 20 feet away and has to hear the word, that means the magic user will have to say it loud enough for the victim to hear it, and thus anyone within 20 feet of the magic user will have heard it too. This may not be too discreet. If the vocalization of the word is just to cause the magic to be, then the word can simply be stated in a rather low tone, meaning most people would not know what is happening to the victim. This is quite a good spell. Next is Mordenkainen's Lucubration. It has a range of 0, a casting time of 1 segment, the duration is instantaneous, and the area of effect is the magic user. By use of this spell, the magic user is able to instantly recall any spell he or she has used and otherwise forgotten during the past 24 hours. The spell must have been memorized and actually used during the stated time period, and it cannot be of greater power than 5th level. Mordenkainen's Lucubration enables the spellcaster to recall any 1st through 5th level spell precisely as if it had never been cast. Only one such spell can be so recalled by use of the Lucubration Dwemer. The spell recalled can thereafter be cast normally on any succeeding round. Material spell components must be available if the spell recalled requires such, or else the remembered spell is not usable until the material components are available. So this is quite a powerful spell, quite useful in the right circumstances, that is. I can see a lot of people using a spell and then immediately using this spell to recall it and use it a second time. But it has to be remembered that you can recall a spell that's been used in the past 24 hours, but it must also have been memorized during that stated time period. If the magic user knows they're going to go on a multiple day delve into a dungeon or on a journey where maybe memorizing spells will be difficult or impossible, then this spell would need to be used in the first 24 hours of the dungeon delve or the traveling, which does put a big limit on it. However, once a spell is recalled, there doesn't seem to be a time limit as to when it can be cast, as though it had been memorized. Obviously, most people will try to recall a 5th level spell rather than a 1st level spell, simply because it will grant them access to more power. But the right 1st level spell might be the thing to have in the given situation. An interesting spell, and one I quite like. Next is Transmute Water to Dust. It has a range of 6 inches, a casting time of 6 segments, a permanent duration, and an area of effect of 1 cubic inch per level of the caster. This spell is identical to the 6th level druid spell of the same name, except as noted above. The magic user does not need mistletoe as material component. So I've already talked about this spell in my video on 6th level druid spells, and I will put a link to it so you can go check that out. And now we can have a quick recap. Chain Lightning I really liked. Contingency is also potentially very useful. Ensnarement, as I mentioned before, I'm not big into the extra planar things, but a very powerful spell for that kind of thing. Eye Bite, I really like, again, quite a good range of uses for it. Mordenkainen's Lucubration is something that can really be useful again. And Transmute Water to Dust, also quite good. Overall, the new 6th level spells here are quite good and quite worth having. This has been the Grumpy Old Slan looking at 6th level magic user spells in Unearthed Arcana.